Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at Mercury's retrograde in the sign of Virgo, which is coming up this week, and we are going to take it through all 12 whole sign houses and give you some horoscopes. So the purpose of this is to get you ready for Mercury retrograde in terms of the topics that Mercury retrograde is likely to be activating in your natal chart according to your rising sign and a whole sign house configuration. So I recommend listening for your rising sign because that will align with the whole sign house version of your birth chart, which is what ancient astrologers looked at and Indian astrologers today still look at. So, and that's the way that I practice personally. So I would recommend your rising sign. Of course, you could listen for your sun sign if you wanted to as well. And we're going to take a look at this Mercury retrograde today. So before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections, helps the channel to grow, as you guys know. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com. When you're out there, be sure to check out the readings and courses. We have a new course coming up this fall. Our Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic starts up again later in November. If you have any questions about what you find, email info@nightlightastrology.com. Okie dokie. So here is where we're heading with this. Let me pull up my chart first. So we're taking, whoops, got all sorts of screens flying around here. All right, here we go. So we're taking a look at Mercury's retrograde in Virgo. And this retrograde officially starts tomorrow. That's Thursday, the 24th. And let's see here. Here we go. So you can see this is around 4 in the afternoon, Thursday, August 24th, that Mercury turns retrograde. And we're going to just take this forward now and show you the duration of the retrograde. So Mercury is exalted in its own sign, protected from the combustion by virtue of being in its own chariot. So a really strong and likely helpful, useful Mercury retrograde in an earth sign, one that can move and manipulate forms in the world, in our lives, and revise, edit, make them better, solve problems. Really nice looking retrograde. Now the station to turn direct, the retrograde into station happens around the 14th of September, and you get direct motion again by the 16th of September. So, it's about 3 weeks or so that you got the Mercury retrograde sort of in full effect. And often the station points turning retrograde and direct and the slow period where Mercury's barely moving are the strongest. The direct times are usually when things are kind of getting back on track or you are finished and ready to move forward again after a period of revision, reflection, and change relative to the topics of Mercury and the topics of the house it's visiting in your chart. Well, with that being said, what I want to do now is take a look at your rising sign. We're going to go Aries through Pisces, look at the whole sign house placement of Mercury in Virgo, and give you a few ideas as to what topics might be activated right now, given that placement. So I'm going to put Aries on the ascendant for starters. And then what I'm going to do is just give you some topics to point you in the right direction. So we're going to start with Aries. And you know what? I better bring this back so that we can see that Mercury is, this is Mercury having stationed and turned direct. So let's bring it back to the retrograde. All right, there we go. Okay, so if you are an Aries rising, then this Mercury retrograde is taking place in the 6th house. Now that place was called the joy of Mars and is associated with work, sacrifice, labor, service, anything that's chronic that we have to persevere through, like sicknesses, diseases, or illnesses that are kind of nagging and represent hardships that we have to overcome through courage, perseverance, work, determination. It's a blood, sweat, tears, chop wood, carry water kind of house. So with Mercury retrograde in this house, I like the idea of problem solving as a way of overcoming adversity. So coming up with creative solutions, new ways of thinking, ordering or reordering, organizing or reorganizing things as a way of becoming more effective or as a way of overcoming some kind of hardship or difficulty. This can also be a place where you are sharpening or honing skills, but it requires labor and sacrifice. This can be about a change of mind with respect to your values and where you're applying your energy, sacrifice, and efforts, or there can be some emphasis on who or what you feel is worth serving. And so these are the kinds of things that I would watch for my Aries people out there with Mercury retrograding in your sixth. Also, any kind of overcoming of adversity through creative problem solving, that comes to mind. All right, so for Tauruses, Mercury's retrograde is in your fifth house. Now, first of all, this could mean that there is some kind of transformation happening for your children if you have them. It wouldn't be surprising to see kids going through a kind of transformational process. But I'm giving that very generally because it really then encompasses all the different kinds of changes you could see, some more difficult, some easier. But watch for transformational process around your kids or children, or the topic of pregnancy, trying to get pregnant again, or revisiting the subject of pregnancy somehow. The other thing that can come up with Mercury in the retrograding in the fifth house is perhaps something to do with art, creativity, self-expression. This house was called the joy of Venus and is associated with anything artistic and sensual, romantic and creative. Anything that gives us pleasure, but also that is creatively rewarding or fulfilling. And so, could this be a time where you're picking your paintbrushes back up again after a while of not using them? Or could it be a time where you're learning some new means of creative expression? Could there be an emphasis on revising or transforming yourself creatively? What brings joy or happiness, and how is your thinking preventing you, the way that you think, preventing you from experiencing greater pleasure or happiness or creative fulfillment? So some change of mind related to some change in creativity. And then again, I would look at the process around children if you have them. An opportunity for creative revisions or creative transformation for Tauruses. And that could extend itself into any area of life where a creative change of eye or vision is requiring that you edit or transform something or change the way that you're doing something so that it's more creatively satisfying. All right, well, with Geminis, we bring Mercury's retrograde into the fourth house, which is the place of home and family, parents, ancestors, things from the ancient past, land and property, home and living environment. Changes to your living environment could happen during this time. Meaningful changes around relationships to family members, things that are transforming for particular family members or maybe your parents. Transformation of your living environment and the way that you organize or the way that energy flows in your home. These are the kinds of things that I could see happening here. Also, some kind of initiation from youth into adulthood, marriages, children being born, the moving away from the family or town of that you grew up in, the hometown or home family. The reason I say this is that Mercury and Virgo in particular in the fourth house can be associated with the initiation of youth into adulthood. Virgo was a constellation image associated with a young woman, and her proximity to the fall equinox, the mythology of that relates her to the initiation of the young woman into the mysteries or into sexuality or into adulthood in some way. So some kind of initiation process, something related to family and home and things around the living environment. Watch for a transformational process during the next 3 weeks ahead with respect to those topics. All right, if you're a Cancer, then we're moving this Mercury retrograde is going to go through your third house. Now, the third house was called the joy of the moon and is associated with everything that moves and swims rather subtly in the environment around us. This is mind and emotions. This is the physical environment and the fluctuations around us. That's why it's sometimes associated with your neighborhood. For a lot of us, the neighborhood doesn't really matter anymore. Our neighborhood is more found on the scrolling we do in the profiles we visit regularly online than it is with our actual neighbors who we don't have any real connection with or who have no influence over us or on us. So when you see a Mercury retrograde in the third house, it's pretty common for things in the environment to go through a more substantive change, where you start to recognize, oh, this thing in the environment has a strong influence on me. And do I like that or do I not like that? Do I want that to change? It can also reflect things like, the transformation around technology. You buy a new cell phone or you get a new laptop, or anything with respect to travel, sometimes too, like the short journeys that you take. The third house can relate to siblings as well, the karma of siblings, our relationship with our siblings. Mercury in this house retrograding can also suggest a change of mind, a change in the way that we think or communicate. And also, maybe broadly speaking, can pertain to education and learning. And so these are the subjects that I would watch for in the next 3 weeks as becoming very important somehow. And there's a change in how you're looking at things, or how you're organizing or ordering things, or changes to the way that the environment is set up or organized around you that become really important, perhaps as a way of healing or creating more flow. That comes to mind especially. Okay, let's go on now to Leo rising, which places the Mercury retrograde into the second house. Now that is, of course, a place associated with money and resources. But more broadly speaking, it's what we have, what we're in possession of, what we are trying to cultivate, which could be something intangible like a skill or an ability, as much as it could be something we're trying to develop, like monetarily, like money in our bank account. When Mercury retrogrades in this house, sometimes you'll find that people are purging their subscription list to make sure that they're not spending money on things that they're not using. Or you'll find that Mercury's retrograde in this house reflects a different approach to using or handling money. But it could be more abstract than just money. Time and energy, for example, and how we spend them or use them, and whether we're doing so effectively or as a way of enhancing our happiness or well-being, can also come into question while Mercury is retrograde in the second house. Questions of what we are growing and cultivating, whether those are skills or practical skills that we can make money from, or whether they are abilities that we want to have, like the ability to be patient or calm or thoughtful or constructive, or to control our words or speech. Whatever the case might be, Mercury's retrograde in this house is like, you could think of it as like a moment of taking stock of what we have and what we're trying to develop, and then maybe reordering our priorities in some way to reflect what we really want to have, and what we are, maybe what we have that we no longer need too. It's not uncommon for people to sell or get rid of things or donate things that they no longer want or need. So income and expenditures, time, money, energy, and resources, and changing of priorities in that area. All right, let's go to Mercury in the first house. Retrograde in the first house as your ascendant ruler, for all of you Virgo risings out there, can reflect a pretty serious change of identity, change in how you speak, or change in how you look, change in how you think, your self-concept. This is a time to really look at who we are becoming, especially for, kids. Like if you have a kid anywhere from, 7 or 8, maybe all the way through teenage years, and they're a Virgo rising, this may be a back to school period that reflects a pretty fast and substantive transformation of identity. I know, for example, my daughter, who is going to be turning 8, is a Virgo rising, and she's going to be going to a new school. And although a lot of her friends she'll know from, there's basically 2 elementary schools that are merging. And she's going to be meeting a lot of new people. And so some aspects of her identity will be the same because her old classmates will be there, but there's also going to be new people. This is the perfect situation for her to have a little Mercury retrograde going on in her first house. And it's a simple example, but it's only, it's about 3 3 weeks long or so, right at the beginning of the school year for her. I want to extend that image of a kid going back to school and having to adjust to new classmates and, something like that, to anyone who's a Virgo rising. You are going through a process of, reconsidering who you are, or having to integrate new aspects of who you are into maybe a new environment. So really it boils down to identity, maybe health and body, appearance, and psychology, and changes that you are in the process of making in that area, or maybe even being forced to look at in some ways because of other things that are, things that are coming up in other areas of your life, depending on your chart, whatever other aspects are hitting in different areas of your chart. Somehow this Mercury retrograde says, okay, let's pause and ask ourselves, who am I? Who am I becoming? How am I changing in a very personal way? Well, for Libras, the Mercury retrograde finds itself in the 12th house. If you're a Libra rising, the Mercury retrograde falls in the 12th. Now, to me, Mercury retrogrades in the 12th, if it weren't for the powerful dignity of Mercury in Virgo, where it's in its domicile, it's exalted, it's in its own chariot, it's a very constructive retrograde, would typically be a lot more chaotic. When Mercury retrogrades in the 12th, you'll often find that there's a kind of chaos magic that's drawing your attention to unconscious pieces of yourself, maybe self-destructive pieces of yourself, or parts that exist in the shadows that you have either turned you've turned what do they call it? Turned a blind eye. Well, you've turned away from, you're ignoring, or somehow you're not able to be aware of. There's not enough consciousness there to be aware of these factors, and it would be normally very chaotic and I think challenging. But because Mercury has such nice dignity, I think also for Libras, I have to mention Mars is moving into your first house. There may be a willingness to look at your mental patterns, maybe mental and emotional patterns, and to, basically define the courage to look at unconscious material that's coming up right now during this retrograde, and to face it head on with courage. Mars in the first house can really help people to face things about themselves that are difficult. Sometimes with that combination of Mars entering your first and Mercury in the 12th, you could also find that there are like unconscious, like belligerent parts of yourself that are coming forth, and the conflict or chaos that they create forces you inward, and you have to take a look at things because a kind of a rowdier, like less civilized, for Librans, like less civilized part of you is expressing itself. And I think that could be scary for Libras, but this retrograde at any rate should draw your attention to some of your unconscious dynamics that are at work in creating peace or chaos for you right now. And I think there's an opportunity here for some really nice personal refinement if you're willing to pay attention and take responsibility for those parts of you that are showing themselves, even if they're not fun to look at. And it could be that people that are showing themselves and showing things that you don't want to see, but you also have to pay attention to. You can't be in denial about the truth that other people are showing you. Believe people when they show you who they are, sort of thing. All right. Well, we then have Scorpio. So Scorpio is in the first house, and that places Mercury's retrograde into the 11th, the place of groups and friends, allies, benefactors, powerful and positive influences. It's also a place that's associated with our hopes, our aspirations, our wishes. When we see a Mercury retrograde in this house, it is very possible that there is a transformation at work within a group or community that we're a part of, or with respect to specific friends or allies that we have, that there are allegiances that are changing, loyalties that are changing, friendships or allies that have sort of offered what they have to offer and are now ready to be released. And that doesn't have to be we don't have to burn bridges or make that a bad thing, but just a natural parting of ways with people that have like served their role in the play of our lives and are now ready to go in different direction. This can also be about internal changes within groups, the way that groups are organized. This can be about a change of priorities for us socially or professionally. This can also be about what resources are available to us and how those resources are changing. So those are the kinds of things that I would watch for with respect to Mercury's retrograde in your 11th house. That's for Scorpios. Let's go forward to Sages. So for Sagittarius, the Mercury retrograde is in your 10th house, the place of action, the place that calls us into the world to engage, often a place associated with vocation and career, but more broadly speaking, what engages us with the greater social and societal reality that we are living in. Mercury's retrograde here can therefore signify changes in career, changes in title, changes in duties, changes in interests professionally or socially in a broader sense, not so much your social communities and friendships, but your social sense of obligation, duty, work, or calling. Mercury's retrograde here can signify transformation within the company you work for, your relationship with your boss or who you answer to, or changes in the level of responsibility or duties that you have. It could also signify a change of the literal environment that you work in. But whatever the case is, this is also a time to look at what's working and what's not working around calling, profession, and career. And that's for the next 3 weeks or so for Sages. Let's move forward to Capricorns. So for Caps, we're taking this Mercury retrograde energy, placing it into the 9th house. And Mercury in this house in particular can represent a process of questioning, a process of evaluation, of scrutinizing, or of weighing, sorting, and discerning or judging what is valuable, what is necessary, what is unnecessary, what do I believe. This is a place that represents our beliefs morally, ethically, spiritually, philosophically, intellectually, politically. How is our compass oriented? Mercury retrograde in this house, a very powerful Mercury retrograde, can offer us feedback somehow that we're taking and using to refine and make more mature or intelligent our views and beliefs. This can be about revisiting things you've studied in the past, going back to school. It can be about some kind of meaningful travel or international journeys abroad, pilgrimages, religious or spiritual transformation, teachers, and the subject of teaching, information and how it's changing your mind, learning and how it's changing your outlook. These are the kinds of things that are up for review and are bringing a process of transformation in the next couple of weeks. So for Aquarians, we take Mercury's retrograde and it lands in the 8th house. Now, the 8th house is, broadly speaking, I like to think of it as a place of debts. It's a place of fears, debts, obligations, entanglements, but as well, it is a place of the unexpected gifts and blessings that come from our entanglements and relationships and contracts that we have with other people. And so with Mercury's retrograde here, you might see a spouse or a loved one going through a job change or changes around their money or finances that have an impact on you. There could be gifts that are given, inheritances that are received, debts that are paid off, or new debts that are taken on. And those debts could come through emotional bonds with other people or financial bonds, business agreements or contracts that have something to do with literal money or financial arrangements, but also contracts that have to do with some kind of give and take that will be established from this point onward. It could also be that something that has been exchanged or something that someone or something that you've been in a bond with is ready to be released. The topic of death and transformation around the topic of death in the 8th house is always a possibility. So the kind of death and rebirth process here could be a little bit more intense with this Mercury retrograde. There is, in some ways, a process of facing fear and being reborn as a result of facing fear. I think, for example, of my youngest who's starting school. She has this as a Aquarius rising. She has this one. And she's, she's definitely going to get her courage up to go to school right now because it's a pretty scary prospect for her at the moment. She's a little bit more shy and anxious, So this will be her process. It's very eighth housey. Let's go to school and see how, complex and weighty it can be to have to share life with other souls who have stuff they carry. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm sure she's going to be just fine too. Last but not least, as always, I always like to say that just so that our Pisces don't feel like I've had to wait all the way till the end. Mercury's retrograde is in your 7th house, the place of relationships, love, marriage. Broadly speaking, Indian astrologers associate this house with the philosophical concept of kama, or pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure and sensual fulfillment. Of course, that comes through sex, which was associated with this house, but also through marriage or relationships. The amorous pastimes of the 7th house, So Mercury's retrograde here can suggest a transformational process within a relationship, meeting someone new, getting out of a relationship. Broadly speaking, there is maybe some kind of reordering or rethinking or a change in how things are being communicated or perceived within intimate relationships or in relation to the topic of pleasure or interpersonal relationships, more broadly speaking. So that's what to watch for if you're a Pisces. It's just pretty straight up the house of relationships that is receiving the retrograde. And so the main thing if you're a Pisces to watch for is how are you being asked to grow and change through relationships with other souls. Maybe especially adding in the concept or the idea of pleasure and sensual fulfillment with other souls, that we're here to love and be loved. That this retrograde seems to be hitting on that for our Pisces people. So I hope that you found this exploration of Mercury's retrograde through the 12 signs useful. And I hope that you will have a really great retrograde season here over the next couple of weeks. Remember that this retrograde is also happening as Venus is being reborn as the morning star. And so I think it's safe to say that this period of mercurial transformation, Mercury is going to join Venus as the morning star. And so it's as though Mercury is aiding in the process of Venusian rebirth for all of us in some way. The creative and relational and sensual transformation implied by Venus's birthing as the morning star seems to be getting help from Mercury's practical revisioning and reordering and Mercury's own rebirth that is taking place over the next couple of weeks. And through Mercury's retrograde, Venus appears as the morning star, turns direct again. So Mercury seems to be aiding in that process. And I think that's a fun way of looking at it as well. All right, that's it for today. I hope you guys are having a good one, and we will see you again next time. Bye, everyone.